Hey, everybody. This is Jacob Stoops. I am here with Nick Ranger. Or is it Nick or Nikia? Which do you like to be called?
Nick's fine.
All right. Nick Ranger, SEO specialist from Web Firm. How are you doing, Nick?
How you doing? Lots of love from Melbourne, Australia.
Yes. My first international guest. So very excited. And for those of you that don't know, I am a very, very awful project manager and or coordinator. So it took well over a month to finally get the timing all right. And Nick was super patient with me, and we're finally here and finally ready to talk some SEO.
Hey, love what you're doing and really, really happy to be a part of it. Thank you.
Awesome. So Nick, take me into your background. How did you get into SEO?
SEO, I got into via a friend who was the head of website development at a company called Predictor. Basically, I came back to Australia from Cambodia after teaching music for over a year. I've got a very unusual background, and I've got lots of experience in different types of things. I used to be a civil engineer, then I went into accounting, and then I guess at that point in my life, I thought, well, what am I going to do? I got this opportunity, and he just said, have you ever heard of SEO? And I thought, what on earth is that? Did a bit of Googling, went to the interview. By sheer dumb luck, he hired me. And for the next 3 years, I sat in a room and with a team of 3 other people and helped grow the company to 27. So it was a very chaotic, a lot of existential crises and a lot of hard work. But now in this point in my career, I lead a team here at Web Firm, and I'm just absolutely in love, totally addicted.
So that has been kind of one of it. It's been my reason for doing the podcast, right? There's a lot of people that do podcasts within the industry that it's straight knowledge sharing. And I absolutely feel like that will and should come out as I talk to people. But what I'm more interested in are the many, many different backgrounds that people come from. And I think out of everybody that I've talked to thus far, it sounds like your background might actually be the most interesting and diversified. So I guess take me into how do you go from a music career to being a civil engineer to accounting to how did you go from those to SEO? Where were you before you got into SEO? That's fascinating to me.
I think the underlying thing throughout all of it is if I'm interested to find out an answer to something, it's going to bother me until I figure it out. So I think that kind of application really helps me out in figuring out what I'd like to do. And ultimately, I guess now that I'm at a point where I do things not because I'm inspired monetarily, but I'm inspired by curiosity. And I think that really underpins a lot of those changes.
So tell me about some of your successes, right? Accounts you've worked on. You just talked about a big one with respect to your company. Tell me about that. Yeah.
So Predictor, I left Predictor about a year ago, and now I'm at Web Firm. And I needed a new challenge. But when I was at Predictor, like I said, I got to do all kinds of things that I don't think a lot of other SEOs might have been able to experience that early in their career. So I worked with some of Australia's largest brands. I worked with 40 Winks. I worked with Paz Paley. I worked with iSelect. And of course Simmons Group, and a lot of other sort of mid-tier companies. And I think with working with such a small team, it really challenges you and really pushes you to kind of just sit there and just hit your head a little bit on the brick wall, just trying to figure out like, okay, here's the problem. Here's what we're trying to overcome. I know that by solving this, it is going to help with either indexability or crawlability, or make this a lot more human readable, or I guess like have really much better algorithmic signals. So how do I solve these kinds of problems? And I think like the biggest successes that I've had, I think, is being able to go back and say to the client, we have been able to improve your traffic by X%. We have been able to improve your goal conversion rate by X%. And when I can see in the analytics, like all the numbers sort of starting to like, either go up or in some cases go down, like with bounce rate and things like that, like it's just hugely rewarding to see it be able to work. And that really is what inspires me all the time to try a little bit harder and to think outside the box. And sometimes like I have problems that just keep me up at night that I'm like, well, why, like, if we need to like change the files, like because it's being loading from the CDN a bit differently, but if we do that, it's going to like delete all the apps that are actually like improving site speed. Like what, like how can we get around these kinds of issues? That's a Shopify issue, but like those kinds of things, like they just annoy me to the point where I have to either go outside the expertise that I know and ask the community, or I just spend hours on Google just Googling everything I can on testing. And I think my biggest successes really are being able to have like huge hitters, like being able to rank for health insurance, being able to rank for beds, both number one in Australia, which is a huge achievement, I think, in a lot of people's books. But it really is that kind of like client interaction and being able to, look someone in the eye and be like, we did a good job for you. You were making X amount of more money than when you started with us. And that's really, really rewarding.
Yeah, definitely. It's in my experience a thrill watching the results kind of go up and to the right after after things start to get implemented, and it really happens once things start to get implemented, and it takes some time, but it eventually slowly but surely starts to go, and sometimes even less slowly starts to go in the right direction, and it's incredibly rewarding to be on the back end of that and go, see, I told you so. I told you it was going to work.
I was right.
Yeah. Because I do find that there can be, even with clients that like want to believe in SEO and pay good money for SEO, some skepticism, or not only skepticism, but the thing that I feel like I run into most often is just difficulty getting recommendations and changes prioritized and in the pipeline and executed. So how have you been able to do that for your clients?
I have, I think the success of being able to really literally do anything is communicating ideas, communicating this is the reality of the situation. This is the goal that you have and your company has, and this is how we're going to creatively be able to match those goals with the strategy that we tailor for you. I actually, now that I'm with Webfirm's a different company, and we've got a huge client profile, and I'm finding like a lot of personal reward with working with smaller clients, like with smaller budgets. We're having to be a lot more creative in the things that we do. And I had one client that's literally said like, I'm just ticking by. I don't have a lot of money. I know that we're probably not going to get the best amount of care because I've looked it up online, I've asked my friends, and they're spending X amount of money and getting this result, and all I have is this. And I don't know, it just kind of struck me on a very human level. Like, this is this person's whole livelihood. This is their family. This is their mortgage. Mm-hmm. And, what can we do as professionals, but also as people to help each other? And like, this is something that like I probably shouldn't do all the time, just because like for a business benefit. But the time that I put into that client, I just like started like doing a little bit of my own, like messing around with their CSS and the HTML and building the little like custom buttons and setting it all up nicely and, breadcrumbing everything and making it all really, really quite slick. And like last week I sent them off an email and said like, year on year and data, we've had like a 348% increase in goal conversions. So, and he's like, this is, I have up until August booked. This is insane. I've never had that. And, like when it has like that really real world application, particularly when someone's come to you and said like, I don't have any money, like I'm struggling. Like that's amazing. That's really, really incredible.
It's interesting that you bring up a story like that, because I have a family friend who was recently approached by a small agency here in town, and I'm in Columbus, Ohio. Won't mention the agency's name. I've been at big agencies and I've been at small agencies, and I'm familiar with this place. And part of me, and this family friend runs a nonprofit, and her nonprofit is focused on taking and making custom blankets for children that go into foster care. It's called My Very Own Blanket. And so they make this blanket, and that way these children have something that's there to comfort them when they're going into this very stressful situation in their lives. And so she had this company approach her to do all kinds of different marketing things. And I remember being at a small agency, and they always say like, yes, we're going to get you X, Y, and Z, and you got to pay this amount of money. But for a nonprofit like that, who's not really bringing in revenue, the only way that like she's going to be able to pay that is if the money comes out of her own pocket. And so she said, Jake, what would you do? And being a part of that, I know the reality is that there's a salesperson and they promise this vision, but then the person on the ground who probably has 20 or 30 or 50 or 100 clients, right? And that money is going to be output into a certain amount of hours or time that they can spend, but chances are they're going to be spread thin. They won't have the expertise in what she's trying to do, and they're just trying to get by and keep their head above water. And the amount of money that she is putting in will versus the work that she's going to receive in return probably isn't going to get her what she's looking for. So she reached out for me to help her, and I'm going to do my best to kind of do the same thing that you have done. So that's a really nice story, and really awesome that you've been able to drive that impact for somebody that really need it, to the point where like if they had put their faith in maybe somebody else who doesn't have maybe as much integrity, all that money would have been going out the door, and maybe they shut their business down, right? So yeah.
I mean, it's so scary, because that's a harsh reality sometimes. We see it for small business, we see it for large business. No one is immune. If you have a site, back it up. If you have a business, you need to understand where the attention is, and be able to place like your product, your service, where that attention is, and be able to understand users. And going back to SEO, a lot of that comes from user intent, and I like trying to unpack that and be able to place that logic into the format of a website.
Mm-hmm.
And ideally, that's what we're trying to do here. I think like just working with a lot more smaller budgets really teaches you to be a lot more critical of your priority lists. And if I can impart any sort of value there, I would definitely say like go in pretty hard with technical fixes. In the first instances, like a lot of people imagine that like SEO is just, you just change a couple of title tags and meta descriptions and H1s, and that's kind of like what you do, right? Like
sprinkle the keyword on it.
Yeah, this quote unquote magic. I find like the whole concept of SEO being magic like a little bit hilarious, and it's not magic. It's there's like it's a lot of problems, but it's very, very logical, methodical work to me. And it's always making sure that I'm keeping to the logic of always thinking like, is this going to better serve the user? And it seems almost silly to constantly reiterate that point, but I mean, that's literally what we're trying to do here. Google makes it so that they change your algorithms and in that it's always going to be better serving the user at the end of the day. So if we're playing the game with them, that should result. I don't know. I mean, I don't know why that goes over some people's heads.
Ultimately, what you're trying to do is just make the best website possible, the best experience possible, right? Whether that's technical or content or even local or international, making sure that wherever the website is showing up, showing the client, customer, the website, it's putting its best face forward. So what's it like doing SEO in Australia? Like what kind of problem? I primarily focus on the US. Now, granted, we have some clients that have sites elsewhere, but my core is the US. So what's it like, I guess, with your core probably being Australia centric? Or am I misreading what your client base typically like focuses on?
I think maybe like I don't have too many like at WebFirm. I don't have too many international clients, but I do find that anyone that's okay. So Australian sites have like very their own Hreflang attitudes, and I think if I can sort of say anything, like if you've got a site that you've launched in America and you want to start business here in Australia, don't duplicate it, and just have like maybe a subdomain for Australia. I don't know. Does that answer your question?
That I don't know. I guess I don't know. I guess what I don't know in terms of how the market and the search engine might act a little bit differently. So I guess in that specific instance, you're saying that it is not better to have an Australian version, because I guess explain that a little bit to me. Maybe I'm getting it backwards.
Well, I guess Hreflang, that helps you drive up your conversions, and
sure.
That helps you drive down the bounce rates. But common misconception of like the Hreflang attributes is that it prevents Google from like displaying your different pages as duplicates or spam. But that's not really true. Like you may have different pages for American English, British English, and Australian English. The differences of this is very minimal, and they're prone to be marked as duplicates. I'm not sure if that particularly like answers your question, but I had one client who had a very successful site that they launched in the UK, and it had incredible amounts of traffic, incredible amounts of engagement on that site, and they basically just replicated it like all the way down, and just change a couple of things in Hreflang to be like en equals AU. Shouldn't do that from memory, but but yeah, essentially it didn't work very well, and they had so many different like format issues, and they weren't getting any traffic, and they were basically like, oh, like I don't understand, like this is so successful at home, like why is this different when we watch it here in Australia? Like is there something special about the Australian market or anything like that? I think like, whenever you're creating a site, whenever you're maybe doing redirect plans and working from country to country, they do have like different ways in which they work. So there's specialization for the US version and a specialization for maybe like an Australian version. Just to utilize like those subtle language differences. Previous work that we've done like sort of suggests that this can impact the likelihood of Google using those hreflang tags by a considerable amount of percentage. So if that's sort of like useful for any US SEO people who are wanting to like do business here in Australia, that might be something to really consider and get some advice before you do that.
Yeah, absolutely. So like things that we tend to run it. One, the hreflang stuff can get tricky, especially if your client has lots of different language versions of their site or different subdomains. Just getting the mapping correct from site to site or language to language and validating that it's implemented appropriately. I feel like John Mueller said, that's kind of one of the more tricky things in SEO, and I can vouch that that's kind of a tricky wicket. I would say the other thing that I see from time to time is clients that they want to have an international version because they have an international customer base, and they'll create, because they're in a hurry, create a version of the site that is either not translated at all. I have a client that created, for example, a German site in complete English, but it has all the URL signatures, the subdomain. It has a German signature, right? The DE, but it's definitely not German when you go there. Which I guess I don't think Google would tend to handle that very well, nor do I think other search engines. So we try to say like, maybe you should translate that, but yeah. And I mean, there's two search engines that use hreflang, like Google Chrome and Yandex. Mm-hmm. So you're definitely going to want to fix that up. But search engines like Bing and Baidu, they use like a different attribute. Using like meta content language attributes. So it's just really important to like know before you're setting up some business to do do like an SEO strategy plan. Talk to someone who has that kind of experience. Ask the kind of parameters around that, because it really can influence the way in which you build sites and structure them. So how did that end up? It's still ending up at we're still working on it. I'll let you know.
It can be quite tricky.
Certain languages, the ones that are translated on the site, are performing quite well. Others, not as much, not so much. And it's a function of them having, and they know they need to do this, but it's a function of prioritization and having thing X, Y, and Z that they need to get done. And unfortunately, this one is just something they need to get done, but it's falling behind certain other things. So the in-market experience is suffering while they get kind of other things done. So tell me about some of your biggest failures. That's something that SEOs don't talk about a lot, failures.
I think all my biggest failures really was in the learning process of just really not understanding I guess, like how keywords worked in a very rudimentary sense. I remember for one client, I was given like 30,000 pages to look at, and I was still learning SEO, and I was like, I don't know what to do with this. And I was in the office there, like the dev was working, and at the time, like we weren't really. I didn't know that it was okay to ask like a million questions, and they're sort of like sitting there with their headphones on, just like coding away, looking very, very grumpy.
Yeah, almost always look grumpy, even when they're not.
Yeah. So I sit there for 3 or 4 days writing out, maybe like, I think I did like 40 unique title tags and 40 unique meta descriptions and unique title tags. And I just copied and pasted all the meta descriptions across 30,000 pages. And I did this all manually.
Wow. That must have taken an amazing amount of time.
That's so dumb. That's like pretty cringe worthy, because to me that's like, so rudimentary, like SEO 101. But, like, unfortunately, like sometimes like we have to learn from our mistakes, and like when we pick up these kinds of areas, like it's so important to be like, hey, I did this. I now know better, or we've had this discussion and this doesn't like meet the logic. So I need to go back and I need to fix this.
So how did you figure out? Is that how you figured it out? You did that work. I'm assuming it took a long time. And at what point did you say, oh crap, maybe I shouldn't have done that?
Yeah. This is sort of when I first was starting to use Screaming Frog, and it was sort of like suggested to me, like, hey, have you seen this thing called Screaming Frog? It's really awesome. It can show you where you might have missed something, or if there's like you can look at like, internal links, you can look at like backlinks, you can look at title tags, you can look at meta descriptions, H1s, H2s, etc., and all the like. And I started just like reading on like how best to use Screaming Frog, and it taught me a lot about how to structure your site, how to write for your site, what makes it human readable, what makes it bot readable, and like that was like a very quick like, oh crap, oh no, and then I did a crawl with that site. And like I just saw like the duplicate over and over. Yeah, just being like, oh crap, oh no, I'm gonna have to go back and do all of that.
At what point did you realize, like, because one of the topics we've covered with several different people is SEO to tech, or SEO, I should say, to developer interactions, and how sometimes they don't always go that well for any number of reasons. And then we've talked about how we can make them go better. At what point did you realize it was okay to go talk to the developer?
I still didn't really talk to a developer for maybe about 2 more years after that. So I've only really started really talking to developers a lot more maybe in the last year, which might sound a little bit crazy. But like I was literally in a separate room to the devs, and it just never really, like, we didn't have that kind of company culture to be able to like go up and ask. And I think a lot of my growth might have been stunted from that. And it was really like I went to a conference. Like, this is going to sound like so like, hey, if you haven't gone to like one of those SEO conferences, you should go kind of things. But like, I literally went to a conference and started to meet other SEOs, and realized like why my experience was so different. I realized that I was maybe a little bit smarter in some areas, but really naive in a lot of others. And linking myself to a community and having people to ask that did what I did. Because granted, I was, apart from the CEO, I was the only one technically doing SEO for the company. And with that kind of responsibility on your shoulders, it's kind of like, well, I have to ask a lot of questions, or I have to bring up issues which would then get solved without me. And I thought, well, like, if I'm going to be able to be a better SEO, I want to be a part of those discussions. I want to understand how script works a lot better. And I started reading W3C, just reading a lot of different forums, building up a wonderful Rolodex of really lovely friends. And I just kind of have a lot of people to ask now if I really, really get stuck. But I think really the success that I've been able to attribute is just from literally just sitting there and not leaving the post until I've fixed it. And that literally has meant staying back until 10 p.m. at night, working weekends, and just grinding, and being able to solve those kinds of problems. I don't know how else I would have been able to do that, to do any of it, to be honest.
So let me ask you this then, because there's I came from a startup most recently, right? I've spent most of my career in agency. I call it agency world because it's a special type of just existence when you're working at an agency. But I took I wouldn't say I took a year and a half off. I found something that I thought at the time was a better fit, and it was at a startup, and I was in a very similar position where I was the only person that did SEO, working with the developers to almost hand in hand, sitting literally. We shared a desk basically, and we were literally sitting facing each other almost all day. I'm sure you got tired of looking at me. I found that when there was a similar culture, right, that people didn't really talk enough, and a lot of things got done without really thinking about all of the marketing or SEO or customer implications. It was just churn and burn, push as many updates as you can, as quickly as you can, and think about it and fix later.
Oh my God, I hope they don't do that for WordPress 5.
Right. And it took a long time. It took probably, if they had been able to prioritize some of the changes that I wanted to make initially, results would have happened, in my opinion, a lot quicker. And it took a long time to build trust with the developers, which means, in my opinion, sometimes you have to show them that while you may not be sitting down and writing Python or straight writing PHP or whatever, that you can hold your water enough to gain their respect, that you know what you're talking about. And then once you start to get things implemented, I feel like a lot of developers are, and I try to have empathy for them as much as possible, because I find that if I think I've got a lot on my plate, they've probably got 10 times more on their plate, coming from 10 times as many people. So I try to have that empathy, because I try not to think that my stuff is always the most important, right? It's the most important to me, but it might not be the most important to them. So I always try to put it in that sort of a lens. But where I find that there's a breakdown is that sometimes the developers, aside from just the general prioritization of things, don't ever get to see results. And I found that when you can get a developer psyched up about what they're doing, because you show them, hey, you added schema here, and look at our results, or, hey, you enabled this piece of content or did this redirect, or we improved the site speed by 50%, or we got rid of all the insecure, any number of tactics that you can do, pointing them to the long-term trend within results. It's like a snowball effect, right? Where like it starts off little, and the more and more you get, the more excited they'll get, and the more they trust you. And it's really important, in my opinion, to have a good relationship with your developers, but also to build trust and respect and show results. And I've found in the past that there have been times where it's almost an adversarial relationship, which not healthy, and I've been a part of that sometimes, and it's not healthy, and it doesn't get anything done.
Yeah, I can completely agree with that. I think this is a very common kind of conversation that a lot of SEOs have with developers and developers with SEOs. I think mainly because, like you said, we're not literally sitting there writing Python or being able to manipulate certain scripts of code. So, like from my perspective, like I'm asking them to fix something, and I'll go in and I'll do like a lighthouse audit, or I'll look at the elements and see where if it's worked or if it hasn't worked. And if I see something broken, then it's usually like I'll get onto Google, figure out why, and then go back and say, this is because of this. Can we do it in this way? And I haven't always had the best kind of reaction from that, because it's like, oh, well, why are you telling me how to do my job a little bit? And I think, just developing that kind of level of respect is really important. And I think, something that I don't personally do is, share performance reports with our development team. Like particularly like when they're making so many, huge leaps with site performance, like from doing optimization for speed, for instance, like site speed and page load speed. So I think that's something that is definitely putting in the brain bucket, because the development team that we have here at WebFirm are just like, they're a wonderful bunch of people, and they work really, really hard, and we have a really good relationship, and I've never had any issues, which is really, really lovely. But I think, at the old company where we had like a main developer that was my friend, and we wouldn't really talk too much about work things, and she sort of like, she's a very wonderful, very unique kind of person, and she was sort of leading her own team of devs that were all outsourced. And I think the kind of demands of that does for that kind of role. I think if we empathize with each other and see from each other's perspective, it's probably always going to lead to better results and better communication between teams.
Yeah, you always work harder for your friends than your acquaintances, for sure. Absolutely. Yeah. So a while ago, you touched on leading a team, and this is not something that I feel like I've touched on yet. What is that like for you to be an SEO in charge of a team? How do you get stuff done? What is it like in terms of just the toll on you as a person being a leader?
I think that it's new and it's lovely. I think having people that are leaning on you to dictate their workloads and to give you direction and to look to you to be inspired. I think that does have a very sometimes taxing human element, but at the same time, when we win, we all win as a team, and it's so wonderful to go back and say, like, look, this is like all the work that you did. This is the context. This is why we're doing it. This is, if I'm getting you to manually load all these images, like, this is ultimately why, and this is why we. I think if you put context to anything, like it gives people a sense of purpose, and I think purpose really drives I guess like a little bit more of a happier working environment. And we have a really, really tight team here. We all joke together and go out to lunch, and sometimes like even spend weekend events together. So it's really, really quite nice. But it's definitely something that I've still fully yet to come to terms with. That there are people that lean on me, and like in turn I lean on them, because I'm used to be such a solo worker.
So what do you feel like you do as a leader to inspire? I don't know if that's the right word or the word that I'm looking for, but if you were giving advice to other people in your position, and I'm thinking about people that maybe they're not natural leaders, maybe they're looking, or maybe they have a good team, but they're looking for another way to push their team or to challenge their team or to just bring another element. Like, what is your leadership philosophy, I guess?
Teach them how to read data. Teach them that it's good to always ask questions, always have context of why you're doing something, to make sure that you're keeping to the logic in the back of your head throughout your entire process from start to finish. And if you are struggling, it's okay. Because a lot of my career has literally just been sitting at a desk and just feeling utterly helpless and very frustrated. So not wanting to have anyone, particularly people that I work with, ever feel like that. It's really made me step outside of myself and try to see things from their perspective just as much as I try and see things from a user perspective when we're creating a strategy. To have everyone a part of why we're doing something.
Yeah, so it's funny. I give my son advice on, he's 5, so he's doing things like learning how to read, just learning how to be a person, right? And sometimes he gets frustrated when he struggles and he runs into kind of a hard spot. And the advice that I give him, I feel like it's applicable to any profession, probably for the rest of life, is when you're struggling with something that is you are literally right at the point of breaking through and growing. The struggle is the point where you are about to break through and learn something or be a little bit better because of it. So absolutely normal to struggle, especially in this industry.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the reasons why this podcast is really awesome, because it sort of takes the quote unquote magic away from like the thing that SEOs do, and that, to say that, hey, we're real people, we're not just going to always have every answer. I mean, we're trying to essentially game an algorithm that changes daily. I mean, Google says not to do that, but to a certain point, that is literally
it's our job.
As white hat as you'd like to, say that you are. Just for full disclosure, we're 100% white hat. I don't believe unless they're like natural citations. But anyway, So I think that's really the strength of this podcast, because I've listened to other interviews that you've done, and you wanted to ask me, who was my biggest mentor, and Cindy Crum, who you.
I was just getting to that.
Yeah, she is one of the coolest people I've ever met in my life. She just taught herself how to read HTML, and really just taught herself how to do almost everything. And I think, going back to what I said at the very beginning, I mean, why do you do what you do? Why do you still sit here and work on these problems for people, for businesses that, I don't know, don't always have like that kind of immediate kind of payoff like PPC does. Where does that constant energy and invigoration come from. And it's really that curiosity that I see a lot in her. And, Brittany Muller's another person that really embodies that same kind of spirit as well. Nava Hopkins, Olga Adrienko, Ashley Ward, a lot of these kinds of people, Jason Munn, Harry Sanders, Peter Mead, these are all wonderful people that in some way or another, I haven't necessarily told them, but they're literally the marker that I have in my mind. It's like, okay, when I get to this point in my career, I would love to be as insightful and as experienced and as authoritative on a subject as I deem them to be. It's wonderful that you're doing this podcast.
I appreciate that. And the interesting thing is, it's part of what I love about the industry is the willingness to connect, the willingness to share, and the willingness of some people to be really, really, really open and transparent and honest. So I had reached out to Brittany, and she's a busy person, rightly so, and said, hey, I can't do this podcast. I just don't have the time, but here are 3 really awesome people, one of which was Cindy and one of which was you. And you guys were both so willing to jump on and I'm grateful because you're taking an hour or an hour and a half, however long we talk out of your day to make time to talk shop with me when you could be doing any number of other things. And there are so many people like that in the industry. And I didn't know Brittany. I didn't know you. I didn't know Cindy, but who are just willing to jump on and help and contribute. And it's kind of in my opinion, a pay it forward mentality. And I feel like if you pay it forward enough times, eventually that good karma will come back to you. And that's not even the reason to pay it forward, but I'm a believer in karma, and I think that karma, if you pay it forward enough, will be in your favor at the end. So I look up to all of those people as well, for sure. Definitely, yeah. Same thing. Aspire to be thought of just like them in terms of their reputation within the industry. So. Yeah. What is your favorite tactic that you're using right now?
Oh, favorite tactic. Site speed is definitely something that I've gone very aggressively with since I've started with WebVerm. Mm-hmm. But it's like I really, really enjoy just going through and looking at the site architecture and thinking like, is this indexable? Is this crawlable? I think when I start off any strategy, ideally I'm looking for the technical health. I'm looking for whether or not it is human readable. So from a user experience, are you able to find what you're looking for? Does it have it doesn't tell you something to do? It doesn't give you information. Do I have any questions outside of that? Mm-hmm. And of course, is this something that is going to be crawlable? How many errors am I going to hit through that? So I think my favorite thing has definitely got to be fixing up that site architecture. Having a really good internal linking structure is something that you can do to your site without having to use any disavow tools or anything like that, or it's something that's with hand in hand with breadcrumbing can really make a lot of really quick and easy wins. And I think it's something that sometimes gets neglected in favor of other different things.
Do you find when you're fixing architecture that it's more how they're piecing together information through links, or that it's messy URLs and not having clean clear hierarchies of URLs and page relationships, or is it a little of both?
To be honest, with the amount of sites that I've done this for, I would say it's definitely a little bit of both. I think that when people are uploading content, there is no forethought as to where you're putting it on the sites, why you're putting it on the sites, and what the ultimate goal of that page is ultimately trying to serve. So I kind of try and like frame it in a way. It's like we're not writing blog posts, we're writing landing pages that serve a particular purpose or a particular goal, and whether or not that goal is to go to other different informative pages or point back to like a product page or a service page or something like that. I think to re-educate and to remind people that every single page on your website really has to count. And if they don't count, I'm going to bring it up and say, like, do we really need this? Is this serving any particular need? Because I look at the crawl log and I haven't seen this one being getting much love. And to be honest, your site is really only as strong as your weakest link. So, that's something to definitely consider.
So that brings up another point. Brittany, I think, Brittany Mueller has long been behind the tactic of either no indexing or getting rid of your low value pages. And just by getting rid of the low performing or low value pages, it's almost like page rank sculpting, except it's not. It's just getting rid of your what I call cruft, so that your overall, and Google says they don't have an aggregate site quality score. I don't personally believe it. And I feel like when you get rid of really bad content, it just by osmosis has to increase the authority that's going to the remainder of the content. I have personally had success with that particular tactic. Is that what you're saying, by potentially weeding out the bad content?
Yeah, definitely 100%. I mean, I think trying to put myself in the shoes of, someone who is coding literally a bot to be able to crawl a site, when, there are things that we can identify just from looking at it. It's like it's got thin contents, there are maybe like one or two links, or maybe it's an open page, it doesn't link anywhere. It doesn't say anything that is useful to a user. It doesn't add anything to the site. It's not functional in any kind of way. To us, it's sort of like, well, this isn't necessarily something that I think is useful. So this is definitely one of those URLs that I would put in the box of this is something that I would no index. But I also think like when a bot is crawling a page, it's doing it incredibly quickly, and it only has so much crawl budget. So I'm thinking like, okay, well, what's the kind of crawl budget we have for a site of this size, of this domain authority? How are we going to be able to best that? And I think like, well, in looking at like, what's the aim of this page? Like, is this something that we're going to have to is there some value on this that we can maybe optimize and like repurpose that content? If we are going to do that, what is the competing keywords that we're going after in the SERP? What do those pages look like with all the content on that page? How would a bot scroll that? So I do still look at things like word count. I still look at things like keyword density. I do look at things like how like the text to HTML ratio, and even where certain internal links are on the page. So it might be at line 43 versus maybe line like 503, depending on the size of the page. And I will look at what the competitors are doing, and just to sort of get an idea of a benchmark. And I educate the clients to think a little bit more about, well, let's give something really useful back to the user But this is essentially what we're trying to best, what we're trying to work towards. And it's, again, going back to it, like, it's how you present those ideas, and how much people work with you to be on board with that is, I think, the success of a strategy, because it's, at the end of the day, it's all about execution.
Absolutely. What tools are you using? What are your favorites?
Yeah. All the normal ones, like, Google Analytics, Search Console, Google Tag Manager, like SEMrush, Screaming Frog for many years now.
Yeah.
And I used to use Ahrefs a lot, but we don't have that at WebVerm yet. So it's really just those other ones.
Okay. Which one do you like the best out of them, though?
Screaming Frog, because since they've done their updates to include wonderful things that Sitebold would do with analyzing the architecture from a visual standpoint of having like that nice little map, I find that really, really easy to visually look at your entire site and be able to pick out, like, oh, okay, this is where we've got some orphan pages here. This is a really important page, but we don't have a lot of links that go towards that to sort of indicate that this is an important page. So it's, yeah, I kind of feel, I like anything that makes me feel a little bit like a superhero, like I'm in The Matrix. See all the moving parts all at once. So yeah, I really very much enjoy that.
In coming from your other careers, what was your first thought when you realized that an important tool was actually called Screaming Frog?
I didn't at the time. Like, I didn't really think much of it. I was like, "Oh, okay, cool. This is just like some kind of video game thing." Like,
what's wrong with these people?
Okay, that's fine. I don't know. I find that there's like a lot of really nice quirks about the way in which we talk about ideas, and we have tools, and the way that we set up things. And I think that's just, to keep us marginally entertained as we just troll through endless amounts of data.
And that was a really grown-up and respectful answer. I like it. Best advice to somebody who's just getting into the industry in 2019?
2019. Congratulations. Long-form content has really taken a headway, and there's a lot of fantastic articles that you can read that tell you best practice and also what not to do, which didn't exist when, in the vast amounts of quantity and detail that it did when I was first learning. But if I was just starting out on SEO, I would be asking people whom I respected, as well as read everything I could. And I would be watching every webinar that I could, because the amount of little nuggets of advice that I pick up from webinars helps me in my career a lot more than sometimes the practical application of it. Because sometimes you come across a problem and it's never immediately clear because you Google it. And sometimes it's, maybe the answer is like buried on page 2 or like, or on page 15. And it might be just like one small little line. I think like a bit of an application of that problem was, I couldn't figure out why like all the schema wasn't showing up in the SERP. And I thought I'd written it perfectly. They were showing absolutely no errors. And I was just like, I don't understand it. I looked at the page source and saw like that there was a little iframe that was just sitting above the Google Tag Manager. And again, this goes back to W3C. I remember reading in there that there were different things that it understands from whether it's in the header or the body text. And I can't remember her name, but I follow her on Twitter, so I'll have to come back to you. But she said in the webinar that if there's an iframe that pops up above that, it automatically thinks that it's reached the body tag, because that's where it's supposed to be. So if it is in any way, and it was just like a bit of JavaScript that was populating that. I was like, oh,
I think I read the same
fantastic
thing. Yeah. I think I read the same thing. Wasn't that long ago.
Yeah, and I just thought like, oh, that's brilliant. I finally found a reason. We took that off, placed it where it was meant to go in the body tag, and lo and behold, like, there's all the beautiful schema that we spent ages writing. So yeah, it was good.
So, personal fact, what is something that most people don't know about you?
Things that people might not know about me. I'm a professional electric violinist. I've been playing violin for 21 years. I have toured internationally with that.
Wow.
And I used to play in orchestras, and now I play in rock bands, I guess. And I've done anything from like death metal all the way to like folk music, playing electric violin.
Is there anywhere where like people can find you playing? YouTube?
Yeah. I'm definitely on the YouTube. On YouTube, on Facebook, on Twitter, and of course Bandcamp. So there is a few albums that I've been featured on.
That's awesome. I mean, so you still do that to this day? As like, is it like a 50-50 split between like your SEO job, or is it just something that's more like a side gig or whatever?
I don't know about the 50-50, because there's, again, like with the curiosity thing, anything that I'm curious enough and I feel fairly adept at doing, I just tried my hardest to do everything. So I'm also an illustrator, and I do like commission artwork for people, and so yeah, I've also got an Instagram that does that. But generally speaking, like I work Monday to Friday from your normal 9 to 5, and I'm trying to do a lot better at succinctly keeping my hours to just the 9 to 5, coming home, having dinner with my partner, and then from 11 to about 2 or 3 a.m. Committing that time to doing my other projects with music and art. And I don't know, I just think that if you don't have like other things to sort of occupy your mind, you might go a bit crazy. And I'm speaking generally, maybe that's just for me, but that keeps me out of trouble.
So I think throughout this conversation, based on some of your comments, I've decided that you're either a robot because you don't need it, or you figured out how to add like 4 or 5 extra hours to the day somehow. Maybe a time traveler. I don't know. It sounds like you do some really, really amazing things that I can't even begin to fathom. Not only just doing, but having the time or the ability. That sounds quite amazing. Really, in person.
That's very flattering. I heard you're not the first person to suggest that I'm a robot.
Especially in this profession, it's appropriate.
Yeah. But I don't know, like, why does anyone do anything? Like, if you've got the curiosity, if you've got the time, if you want to do it, you do it, wouldn't you? So I kind of just, like, if I've got a bit of free time, I don't really watch a lot of television. I definitely see, like, I have a lot of friends and I go out and do all those lovely things, but like if I'm not constantly preoccupied with something, I just need something to do, and I think that's just also attributed to having like chess and Scrabble online, always on my phone. Just like any little bit of time in the day, I think it's just wonderful to use the brain that you've been given.
The funny thing is, and I don't even know where I heard it or who said it, is I feel like when I die, or I'm on my deathbed, I'll never, and granted, I love my job, I'll never say I wish I worked more. So it's really, I feel like now, like I said, I love my job and I love what I do, and I love it so much that I'm now outside of my job talking about it. But it's to enable the pursuit of all of those other things, right? It's a means to an end. So more power to you. I'm glad that you're able to and want to and are finding things that you're feeling fulfilled with. That's all we can all ask for.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely feel very fulfilled. It's wonderful having a job that I just absolutely am so passionate about, and feel very much the same way. I love talking about it. I love sharing any value that I've been able to pick up along the way, and just a big nerd.
Yeah, me too. So where can the audience follow you?
I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter, and I think for SEO, they're my main two places that I spend a lot of time.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining me. And probably, I don't know if you have like meetings or anything, because it's literally the afternoon for you in Australia. But definitely, thank you for taking the time, for being candid, and for being patient with me through our 1.5 month long journey of project management and me messing up the schedule 5 times.
No stress. These things happen, and especially with time zone differences, it's a little bit challenging.
I blame Google Calendar for at least 2 of those instances, but probably it was just me.
These things happen, and I really appreciate your time, and I really appreciate what you're doing, because I've listened to the other podcasts that you put live, the other 5, and obviously, I particularly love Cindy Crumb's podcast, but the first one with Grant Fishkin is amazing as well. And there's the other people are just so incredible. So thank you for the work that you're doing. I think it's really awesome.
Awesome, thank you.